Hey, it's Dale. Welcome to Roleplay Cafe. Just got off a 2-hour playtest of Space Age of Man, which is the fifth one. I'm sure to be posted momentarily or within the next day or so. But I wanted to, during the post-session conversation with Jason, I had mentioned something about games. Offhandedly said like patty cake is even a game. You know, as far as when we're trying to develop a game and we're trying to see what we need to shave off and how we want to streamline to create more of an uninhibited. By uninhibited, I mean it's not inhibited by mechanisms that will impede improvisational expression of role playing and being in the moment to let that occur. So we want it to occur organically and to play off of each other to get there. So we feel that we're really honing in on a point to where the mechanics are so streamlined that they're simply prompting us forward, moving forward through the space, as it were, of what's being relayed back and forth to each other. We're playing off of each other, we're moving, and it's really a mechanic that you don't have to stop, shift out of your mindset to then go, what are we seeing here and how do we want to extrapolate and come up with resolution. There's not much of a break at all. It's a simple roll and you keep going. The most intuitively recognized, understood roll result that will prompt you immediately moving forward. It's no more than a blip on the radar, a thought process. In fact, it's a needed thing to say, oh, what happens? Oh, this, to the detriment of the player, to the potential benefit of the player, and then also, if the player attempts a task interacting with the world, are they automatically competent enough to not require a roll? If there's stakes involved, then you may require a roll. If there's a chance of failure, things not going your way, or it naturally isn't assumed, you can't just take the average. Then you'll roll to see if it's not the result that you wish to impart as a character into the world, right? So then there's an immediate jump to, as a presenter, aka game master, to move the story forward. And this goes back and forth hand in hand with the player character that the player is representing and how he interacts with the world and how he affects the world. So both presenter and player stay in that mindset of moving through and don't have to shift out of it to evaluate certain levels and degrees of probability, success, failure. Nothing wrong with that, but they can engage more so readily in the mindset of the character. Stay in that in character as character and try to approach and react in a way with the world and have an immediate reaction. That way they can stay and they can keep that momentum up. That's what we're aiming for, essentially. Don't want to speak for Jason, but that's what it's a feeling we're going for. You want to know if it feels natural, if you're having to stop, to switch out of one mindset into another. And so far the mechanisms are flawless in that respect. I'm not having, from a player standpoint or a GM standpoint, I have narrative standpoint, that I'm having to be tripped up or to be taken out of the moment to address or assess something else, to be thrown back in, so I can stay in that moment. And that's good. That's good. Now, what is a role-playing game? Now, we talked in the post-session short conversation, about 20 minutes or so. And I offhandedly said, like, even patty cake's a game, where you play, you're interacting with another person. See, games initially, primarily, I guess, competitive, whether it's Monopoly or chess or Go or a myriad of games, traditional games. And that to me is how they're initially, the wording, the verbiage of games are initially bring that to mind, or it's kind of predicated on that. So it alludes to that. But there's a different type of game. Um, there's the cooperative game. And I would submit that role playing is a cooperative, even though the means about the adversarial GM, that you know that that isn't the point of it. The point of it is whether you're playing a highly tactical, uh, mechanics heavy, crunchy game to where you shift out of any kind of in moment uh, role playing as a character and then approach it from a tactical or strategic point of view, that you're trying to overcome these situations that you find your characters as avatars approaching. That's one way of playing it, or you can shift it to where you want to minimize that and be in the moment as in the as things occur, and approach it that way. Still, whether or not you roll a series of dice or evaluate a bunch of stuff or whatever, you're going to have a beneficial or detrimental potentially result, which we're still doing that. We just distilled it down to a simple uh, rule to keep in the mindset. That's just how we're interacting with situations and predicaments as player characters in whatever capacity that you're playing a role-playing game. You're doing it as a group. One person is just facilitating what happens, what's put in front of you. So they're refereeing, as it were, traditionally, as a group moves through there cooperatively to find some kind of result. So they're going through a series of situations and predicaments, situations that they've got to overcome, whether as character or whether as player, whether avatar. That kind of game is a cooperative game. And I submit that even the GM should be in part of that. He's just facilitating the rules and what is happening. So he's just simply referencing what happens here in this situation, how they approach. So he's essentially refereeing when you get down to it. But it's all a game, and it's not a competitive situation. Um, what has been interesting, I think, in regards to, in hindsight, um, I've gone from being a very primarily competitive, very crunchy gamer, to wanting to experience more so uh, games as a character. It's rewarding, and however you use it, to examine personality types or to be in the moment and feel like it's more sensorily real in your mind's eye or in the situation at the table, and then also the spontaneity of it and what may occur that may not occur otherwise if you're if you've switched out of it and you're analyzing and weighing and measuring your resource management and what you're applying it to here and there. With a crunchier game, it's just different experiences. But that is still a cooperative game. Now, like I said, in hindsight, when I look back, and Jason's kind of the main person that opened my eyes to that way of playing, right? Where I had been traditionally very old school, narrowly perceived, and through a narrow lens that you perceive old school. It's the way it is, and we always play the one. I kind of stayed with Red Box, right? I didn't go past that, so it didn't really branch out and get more complex, as it were. I did play first edition, second edition, and whatnot, where it got in a lot of them games back in the '80s got overly crunchily, nonsensically so to where it was more of an exercise in mechanical, lubrication to keep things running to a certain extent to where you could get anything accomplished in a session without, trudging through at a slower pace. So there's always that sweet spot about pace and the mechanics themselves. But uh, Jason came along, and more the immediacy of the situation was then apparent to me, like in game, when you can play more so theater of the mind, less mechanically minded, and still have a totally different enjoyable experience. So I grabbed hold of that, and that's what we've been on a track to do, is try to bring home that experience to where it runs more fluidly and keeps keeps the player characters in the moment, keeps you in character as character, and rolling through that space. And probably the work we've done on that. But this is of interest because I want to point out that there's a third. Like, you can take that even from a cooperative standpoint, like you're playing against the AI, you're playing whatever, but you can do this as a single player. And there are GMless games, or you can play by yourself, or I mean, anything. There's all kind of games now that have been cropping up to where there's single player games on the table. Obviously in video games, but on the table where you're approaching the situation. And I've got games where you're Robinson Crusoe on the island, you're trying to survive. It's very much kind of there's a certain amount of strategy and approach and weighing of of the situation and resources that you have to see if it will be your benefit. Because I mean, the sweet spot of a game when you're engaging in it is that it has to be a little bit of a challenge, and has to be a little bit of a unknown variable that kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat, and you feel like challenge, but you feel like, to me, as long as the rules are intuitive enough and can be readily understood, the fun is applying the rules in a typical game. They don't need to be over convoluted or whatever, because that's a breakdown itself, to where you're constantly not engaged in what the game offers you fun wise, but you're constantly engaged in trying to get over that learning curve, or trying to learn it, or making sure that you've got this and that. You're not engaged. So I think optimally, rule sets need to be intuitively understood and readily applicable to the situation, to where the player can spend their time weighing and judging what might be the best approach, and then seeing if it pays off, right? And then they get this satisfaction, this feeling of satisfaction, or, oh, maybe next time, or whatever. Now I'm having to contend with something else that I didn't anticipate, or this knocked me back, and still it remains a challenge. So this is the engaging part. It's not making rules so overly complex that somebody can't get over the learning curve before you actually access the meat of the game and the enjoyability of it. It's not about that. It's about like, I love games like Blockus. It's just little Tetris blocks. You can sit down. It's a great game, fantastic game. It's like 2 rules, and they're written on the back of it. You can play it. Like Go, you understand in a couple of things what you can do, what the rules are, what your limitations are, and what you can do, and then you as a player get to leverage that. So the bulk of what you do is up to you, and you feel like you have a hand in the results, and you make your best thing. That's when you're engaged as a player. It's not looking at this vast swath of gaming mechanics that you have to be impressed by to try to extrapolate from and understand, and maybe you'll get there one day, whatever. That is, like I said, back in the 80s, the 80s were known for that, those type of games. But something simply, intuitively understood by the players, mechanics-wise, it can be applicable, but the bulk of the game, like Go, is a perfect, there's a myriad of approaches to Go. You know what you do, so you're immediately engaged in the tactics and the strategies that you're going to apply against the other person at the table. easily understood. So I'm always geared toward trying to make games that are the mechanics aren't the problem. You don't have to get over the mechanics to get to where the game is. If the game is good, you're going to enjoy that interaction that the game affords you with. That's the meat of the game. That's why people play, because it's fun. Okay, so I see Jason playing these games. I see games that are they're readily fun. There's aspects of games to where it's a single player. To get back on my track here, that when you approach them, sure, you want to leverage your strategies and tactics and whatnot, and see what happens on one end. That can be how you interact with, like I said, Pandemic or D&D. You're rolling against and seeing probabilistically what's going to happen if you succeed or you don't in any instance in that game. But there's also something to be said for games to where, like, say, if I have no interest whatsoever in football, not the statistics, not anything, I don't keep track of it. If somebody's like that, they come over to your house, you could be a football fan or not, and they just randomly pick a team, and they will root for that team. They don't know anybody on it. They're just the highs and lows and the peaks and valleys and the excitement that they experience is if their team gets a score. If they don't, they're experiencing that excitement. It's not through them wanting to replicate, like on a tabletop, the statistics of each player and what's going to happen. That person, that type of person, which we all is excited about the thrill of what is being exhibited on the field. That's why we play football. That's why it's broadcast and people follow along, even casually. It opens that door to that. That's why people will play casino games. You know, it may be somewhat potentially down on that they don't enjoy or may not prefer games that where you have to move mechanisms around or weigh and measure your probabilities of success and feel accomplishment that way. They just want the thrill of what's going on. And I would submit that even a player with a mindfulness and wants the challenge of competitive play on a tabletop game or any other, or a cooperative game that they're tackling, they want to feel satisfaction that they get over that by, as I throw back, optimally to me, readily understood, intuitive rule sets that can be applied easily without having to check 10,000 charts. Play it. That's optimal to me. That way you can get to the game, but there has to be a game of fun to be had. Otherwise, that game's going to sit on a shelf and just draw dust. So you got that. But there's also the player that just wants to play. Now, my father years ago, he used to make games for us when we were growing up. And he made this game, and he was kind of perplexed at it. And he would always tell me, keep it simple, stupid. But, as far as like, don't get too overly complex with games. But he made the games. It was always, it's like use the theme of collecting Easter eggs. And as a kid, everybody knows, when all right, go find them. You're racing against your cousins or your friends or whoever's out there finding Easter eggs to see how many you can get in your basket. That's what the game's about. So everybody gets this color reference sheet because all the eggs are different colors. But you have to gather your eggs in a certain sequence that your reference card lays them out. You grab them in pairs. And it's simply a deck of cards in the middle, and the kids are rolling and pulling their color. Anxiety. If they get that card, then they get excited and they add it to their pile, and they get one in the basket. If they pull a different color card, they just have to put in discount or discard. If the guy after them or girl after them gets it, then they pull it and put it in there. So it goes around the table. He did that at the variable that there's a crazy crack'em rabbit that pops up, and then you get the crack. people's rabbit and mess it up. It has a big old mallet and sledgehammer and gets to throw it back. So there's a variable. But essentially, those cards are going to produce a certain result no matter what it is. But it's not through strategy that you win this. It's through these kids that sit around and recognize what is going on and are rooting for their team to get, or their, not team, but their basket to get full first. And the person with the last that fills up their basket takes the card and cracks all the eggs in the center. It's representative of like, none of you can get more. I just busted all the eggs today. I'm the winner. And those kids would be knocking on the door constantly, and he's like, hide the game, somebody, because they want to come in and play it all the time. Other times he'd throw it out and let them play it. So that was a lesson for me that even games like that are excitable for, I don't care who thinks that they're beyond that. If you think that you need to be engaged in something where you're leveraging or whatever and can't, be affected by it, it's the same way of going to a casino and you never know if you get a big payoff or you don't. It's that moment when you get it or you don't. It's involvement, it's engagement, it's still a game. Now, if you go, and I'll probably put in the little doodly-doo below here, I created a little game for Jason. He's, if you want a master class in extrapolating what a die result is and what it means narratively to what is occurring, like I said, this example was a football game, full-on football, simply rolling two dice against each other, because essentially what ultimately football or soccer, any game is moving, and it's territory control. You're moving into someone's territory. If you can keep that momentum up, if they reverse it, but they're going to have to go so far to where they score a point. So push back and forth. So these two dice are two different teams, which is more so intuitive. You roll them and find out how far one pushes into the other territory, pushes back. If they push enough, or if the other team didn't push them back enough and then they have a satisfactory, it sets the marker for what they need to accomplish to be able to get into the end zone of the other team. So it's just territory back and forth. And most games are like that, whether it's rugby, whether it's, as far as like, it's just ball control. There's a medieval game where people would just back and forth, right? So, shifting back and forth with these two little dice. And people want to know, like, the nuanced little, most people feel that there has to be a need to see statistically, and there's nothing wrong with this if you got more so time to spend. But if you don't, you need a little quicker summarized game. Now, Jason will take this game. Even though it's bare bones, it's basic, it just showcases the back and forth push of these teams in a certain, number of rolls that statistically match up to about the length of a football game, the number of drives that get back and forth, right? And he will extrapolate from that roll what has happened narratively as a commentator, like he's in the press box, as the game goes off. I find his games more so engaging than if I've listened to a football game on the radio. I would rather listen to Jason's commentary of two dice being rolled, going back and forth, and whatever the game is, and however detailed it gets down to. But this is really a bare bones approach. But he can fill in. He uses those dice to prompt himself to fill in the narrative. So I'll put that in there. Feel free to watch it and see what you think about it. It goes back and forth. He does this regularly on his channel. He knew this is a solo game. He can extrapolate from what the dice gives him, and he fills in what we're seeing through his mind's eye. He's imagining what is going on, and he's laying it out. He's making sense of, even from that little basic knowledge. It wasn't a roll to see if it was a handoff. It wasn't a roll to find out who he handed off to. It wasn't a roll to find out how many yards was made. He fills in that in the narrative in an impactful way for whatever team's represented or whatever, you know what I mean, whether it's the Vikings as opposed to, uh, the Panthers or whoever, and then he fills it in and shows the narrative of what is occurring on the field. So you can still see and feel the excitement in the game. It's still interacting. It's just interacting with the dice that are prompting you toward a certain result. It's the same way, like we'll use prompts in Space Age Man to get us there. But it is not so simple if we gain minimalist that where the where the engagement becomes is put in the purview and in the control of in the authority of the naive narrator representing the world and things in the world, the pushback of the world upon the players, and the players representing the world, and that interchain, that handshake. And both of them are unable to do this and feel in what's going on, being prompted by the narrative. So it's that happy harmony of like a cooperative game, but Jason illustrates this magnificently from a solo perspective. So the joy to be found in just being able to exercise your mental imaginative space at a clip and a pace that is unimpeded. It feels like you just break the shackles off and you just run with things, and you don't have to hem haul around or slam the brakes on a game to say, like, let's roll and find out if there is something here or if there isn't. Because ultimately, nagling over the little details of something is a lot of times a safe space for people, when just the experience of liberated play, unfettered, is addictive. It can grow on you, and it is, in my estimation, a joy to experience and roll with. And when you're having a social game, as in D&D and cooperatively so, that we can play off one another, it's addictive. So I'll put that link in the game before, but or in below in the doobly doo and the little write up. But yeah, you got the competitive games, cooperative games, and an offshoot version of cooperative games, which is the solo game. And it's not, I mean, it could be in the capacity where you're trying to leverage resources to get something to feel accomplished in that way and have that experience. Or it could be the solo version that Jason has expanded my awareness to where he's commentating, whether he's playing a boxing match or a racing game or a football game, and he's rolling the dice to find out, extrapolate what that means and interpret it to whatever degree that the dice will, inform him. And then he can see and narrate what he's seeing and experience in the race fluidly. Not a breakdown the way you have to stop and grind the gears, weigh and measure, but it gives him the pertinent information to find out what critically needs to be known, the big points to where he can roll. Isn't meshed down into some quagmire of trying to ascertain the little bits and bobs and then build something. If you get overly crunchy, as said before, the more moving parts, the more moving mechanisms, the more potential for breakdown. Not only in that quagmire of trying to stop the fluidity of play and the excitement of play, whether you're doing it from an experimental, I want to be in character play and having that role, or whether you're just being, like I said, in that Blockers game where I intuitively know the simple rule sets to where I can engage in actually the fun of going up against another opponent and play and applying my tactics or skills or stratagems against them and seeing how they come out. That's an experience too. It's different approaches, but Jason's definitely opened my mind up to not just a single player trying to leverage resources or stratagems against an tabletop AI. This could be drawing cards or anything, but the experience of watching uh, that game, joining in on it, and seeing it live and engaged, whether it's, like I said, a boxing match or a football game, in the moment. So he's interpreting dice and seeing what transpires on the field or in the ring or on the racetrack or whatever the situation is, or in the rink, the hockey rink, and you can see it come alive and just come out. So that kind of engagement is, maybe I would, unless a word comes up, but like the commentary approach, to where he's witnessing and he's voicing what he's witnessing narratively from what the dice is prompting on the field or in the ring, like I said, or any situation, is coming out of him. So he isn't leveraging a stratagem to do this. The activity is engaging and interpreting, extrapolating what has been provided to you, prompted you, and then spilling it out in interpretive fashion in a narrative that gets there. So that is a way to game too. All right. Anyway, gone over long, but you have a great day. Look forward to the posting of the video. I think Jason's going to get it up. If not, I've did recording myself, so we'll see what pops up. He's a very busy man nowadays, so hopefully the schedules can ease up on him, and he can have more time to get back to what he loves doing, gaming. Otherwise, definitely check out his channel. I'll put a link to that too. All right. Take care, y'all. Bye-bye.